Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast, where we discuss what's happening in the cryptosphere and trading on Earth as it is in heaven. Buckle up and huddle on while we dive in and get weird. Here are your hosts, Joshua and Kim.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Market Mystics. We are recording a day early because I have some stuff going on tomorrow, and Kim was gracious enough to allow me the flexibility to do that. So, welcome to a early Thursday episode brought to you on Wednesday. How's it going, Kim?
Good. We could call it Wacky Wednesday.
We could call
or
it Wacky
Weird Wednesday. Apparently, I like alliterations.
I think we know this.
Mystic Monday, Wacky Wednesday, Token Thursdays.
No, maybe.
I don't know what Thursdays are for us.
If you have some suggestions, let us know.
There you go. We like a good play on words, so
we do. Yeah. We attempt to do that in many of our show titles. Sometimes they work, sometimes they're not as obvious.
Sometimes they're only relevant to us and we have a good chuckle and everyone else scratches their head.
That's true, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, before we get into things, let's run through some market updates. So we have Bitcoin sitting at exactly 0% over 24 hours and down 6% in 7 days, currently trading at 19,122. Ethereum is up 0.3% in 24 hours and down 5% in 7 days, trading at 1,296. So not a lot of movement either way on either of those coins. Our top mover is the number 98th coin by market cap, which is interesting because just the other day, was it Monday we recorded, we had one in the 90s as well.
I just didn't update that number.
Oh, never mind. It's not the number 98th coin.
It's number 61.
Okay, this number 61st coin. It is up. Oh, it is HT. I think it's called Wobi. It's Huobi. Not exactly sure on the pronunciation of that. It is up 20% in 24 hours, up 53% in 7 days, currently trading at $6.31. Wobi is the 8th largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world. Their native token is the HT token. And they have various rewards and loyalties for using that. Similar to using like the BNB coin, if you're trading on Binance, you get lower fees. And so if you hold their native token, similar process with that. The other notable thing about that is their majority stakeholder, who I believe was their CEO from an article I read, has agreed to sell his entire stake in the exchange to a firm that is reportedly spearheaded by Justin Sun, who is the founder of Tron. So that could be pretty interesting. Tron maybe hasn't done a whole lot, but Justin Sun, that name is relatively well known in the crypto world because he has been pretty influential in development of several different coins and just as a kind of a reputable person. So kind of an interesting move if that happens. But there we go.
It'll be interesting to see what that does. Again, this is another really great example of things moving on the news.
That is true. Yes. Well, one of the things what really spurred our conversation today, that's a better way to put it, was we were talking about the things that we're working on in Africa, the people we've met, and just kind of our desire to see Bitcoin being used as a currency, as a parallel system, just accepted like you would accept dollars or rands or euros or whatever, pounds.
Or a Visa or MasterCard.
Yeah, or a Visa or MasterCard. that's Kim and I's heart, is to see that come into the world. And so we were talking about it because I had read a news article that said Bitcoin was becoming boring because it hasn't been volatile in the past 4 months. And I was kind of chuckling because honestly, that's what needs to happen for Bitcoin to really be used as a currency. Some of the volatility has to go away for it to be a stable national currency or global currency or community currency. Like, it's really hard to hold value if something is constantly going up and down and up and down. And part of the up and down of the nature of it is because we're comparing it to something else.
Mhm.
So some of that would change as we start comparing some things to Bitcoin. Um, but that's kind of what spurred our conversation today. And so Kim and I were just hypothesizing, like, well, okay, so Bitcoin's probably not going to become a global currency at $20,000 a coin, but what dollar amount per coin would maybe sustain that? And
Right.
so we were just playing around with some ideas and talking about that. And I threw out like, oh, maybe like $100,000. And then we started talking about a Satoshi. A Satoshi is the smallest unit of a Bitcoin. It is 100 millionth of a single Bitcoin. So it is 0.00000001 of a Bitcoin, 7 zeros and then a 1. And it's named after the creator Satoshi Nakamoto. Uh, and so it's just kind of curious because we were talking about it and I was like, well, what if a Satoshi was worth a penny? Like roughly what a penny would be. And so we did the math, and for that to happen, one coin of a Bitcoin would have to be $1 million. Um, and I was like, wow, that's a far cry from where we are.
Mhm.
But maybe if it started to be used in countries and continents and more places, that might be a conceivable number. I don't know. What do you think?
I think so too. I think a couple things need to happen with it. So, obviously, it will need to stabilize in order to be taken seriously as a currency, although not all world currencies are very stable.
Right.
Just truth. I mean, we could even argue about the dollar. It just happens to be that the US dollar is what everything else is measured against. But
Mhm.
when you change the measuring stick, then you might be surprised to see how things might look if you measure it against something else, right? So
Yeah.
if we were to take gold as the standard, I'm just throwing this out there. I've not looked at it, whatever. But if we measure the dollar against gold and measure the euro against gold and measure Bitcoin against gold, would these things look differently in terms of volatility if we change that measuring stick, right?
Yeah.
So, number one, I think that. I also think, like you said, adoption, even just as a parallel system, which I think is very doable globally, would increase its value because it would have this tangible utility. So instead of this technical utility, so we say it can be used as a currency, as opposed to we are using it as a currency or as something that is tradable on more than just a cryptocurrency exchange. I mean, trading, just kind of like what Armand was talking about last week. Like, what is money and how is it defined? It's the exchange of value, right?
Mhm.
So I think the more it is utilized as something that is holding value and can be exchanged for value, I think the more we see mm, its ability to be a reasonable option and its ability to rise in value. I guess
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm trying to say about that. Um, the other thing I think that is quite possible is, as I think the value will start going up. I think these things together. Okay. So if it starts being used or utilized more often in different scenarios and by normal people as a form of money, and also as we see the current financial system, which has been slipping, uh, I would say ever so slightly, except it's really obvious.
Right.
It's kind of been slipping. And honestly, I don't doubt that we might come to a point in our lifetime where we see the demise of some world currencies that we're used to seeing. That's what I'm going to say. I'm not saying that to be a fear mongerer or anything like that, but I think that it's important. This is why I think Bitcoin is so important, is because if we have it in place as a parallel system, and if something happens to the world financial system as we know it, there's another thing that we can easily transition to. This is why I think Bitcoin is important. And that's when I think we start seeing the value increase. So when people start using it more, and as these other things start decreasing in value, you will start seeing Bitcoin increasing in value. And I think it needs to, in order to be able to be a viable option, because right now, a Satoshi is currently worth almost 2/100ths of a penny.
Yeah.
And with the limited number of Bitcoin that are out there or that are ever going to be available, I think the value of that has to be somewhere comparable to what global currency is worth now.
Yeah. So one thing I think is intriguing about the $1 million per Bitcoin value. Um, and by the way, I'm not saying it's going to go there. This isn't financial advice. This is just a fun fact. If the coin were ever to hit that number,
Speculation.
yeah. If if a Bitcoin was worth $1 million, a Satoshi would be worth a penny, and then there's another proposed name for a smaller amount called a bit, which is 100 Satoshis, which would be $1. And currently in our global system, $1 is very, very close to the value of €1 and is very close to the value of one British pound.
Hmm.
I'm not sure about the yen, but like many of the global currencies, I would say the euro and the dollar have traditionally been the largest. Um, they're very similar. And if we were able to just say, yeah, that's 100 bits, and immediately our mind's like, oh, that's $100 or £100 or €100, that makes it really easy to implement something as another system
Mhm.
because your mind is already, you don't have to learn a new system. You're just changing out dollar or whatever for bit. And I think that that's an intriguing thing because the easier the transition is for people, the more likely they are to start using it sooner. I think one of the challenging things right now is Bitcoin is volatile. So if I go buy a can of Coke, maybe it's 3 bits right now. But tomorrow could be 4 bits or 5 bits or 100 bits. Like, I mean, it's the price is so volatile that it moves, all throughout the day, all throughout the night. It's constantly moving because we're constantly measuring a Bitcoin against something else. But I think what Kim said about, as it's starting to be used, as the value of exchange is switching a little bit, then it becomes a little bit more stable because instead of having the Bitcoin be a third party number, it becomes the primary number, and that's easier to use. when it's like that. And also, it would be easier for people to use if what they already associate value with, if it makes sense with the new value.
Mhm. To your point of it being volatile and, like, changing, like, it could be 1 bit today and 5 bits tomorrow and 3 bits the next day.
Mm,
Um, I I would argue that people already have to function this way if they operate in more than one economy.
that's true.
So maybe the euro and the pound and the dollar are very similar right now. But as you know, we travel to South Africa often and we
Yeah,
have to exchange money. So even if we're
true.
paying with our credit card or debit card, that exchange goes on. And I will look up the exchange rate before I go. I get a general number in mind. And then as I'm in the store, I can calculate what this is costing in dollars, which is my native language for currency. Right.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't think it's all that different. I do think what you're saying about it making for an easier transition is very accurate. Um, it's it's kind of been eye-opening traveling somewhere else that isn't based on the dollar or close to the dollar to see we have to make these exchanges in our brains. But you know what? We have a lot of friends there who are also making those exchanges in their heads on a day-to-day basis because everything is measured against the dollar.
Mm,
We have this native language of a dollar, and so that's all we know. But other countries also measure things against a dollar.
right.
Um, Oftentimes we were just talking about a computer, like purchasing a computer yesterday. And we were not talking about it in Rand. And it wasn't brought up in Rand, it was brought up in dollars because the global market kind of runs on that.
Hmm.
And so I think you're right. If we can get it to where, I mean, this is all hypothesis, really. This is me just spitballing and just me thinking through things. But if we can get it to where there is some easy way to convert, I think it will be so much easier if it is implemented as a parallel system and if at any point it has to be switched over as a primary system,
Mm,
Bitcoin. And I think it'll be easier for the whole, well, I'm really hypothesizing there. I think it would be easier for the whole world if it's similar to what they're already measuring things against.
right.
You're right.
One of the things that's that's coming to mind as we're having this conversation is what Europe did with the euro. I mean, they for quite a few years were all you each country had an independent currency, an independent system, and traveling between the countries there, you constantly were facing exchanging your currency. So they created the European Union, they created the euro so that there was a currency that you could use throughout all of Europe while you're traveling. And that's what we're talking about Bitcoin doing is taking away the borders and the uniqueness of the dollar and the rand and the euro and the pound and the yeah, all the different global currencies, but is taking away the borders of that so that you can travel and you can spend in your native currency because it's the native currency of where you're going,
Right.
or at least an accepted currency. I'll
Hmm.
start with that. And that's just a so I think we already have a use case of where that has happened and how that has benefited. I'm sure some people would argue it wasn't beneficial, but
Probably the people who are for Brexit would
right,
argue that it wasn't
exactly.
beneficial.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as I said that. I was like, yeah, we just had this big deal happen, recently where it was,
Uh,
uh,
yeah.
but I think there's other things associated with that as well. But I think we already have a use case of where it has been helpful for countries to adopt a singular currency. And not that they don't also still have like currency that they use otherwise. Like,
Mm.
it's it. in some countries, it's still a parallel system, and I think it's just fascinating to me that
Mhm.
that's possible, um, and I think that bodes well for something like Bitcoin being used to cross borders without these crazy exchanges.
Mhm. We had this conversation. This had to have come up a couple days ago when we were talking because I feel like some of this is very familiar. But we were talking about how helpful it would be to have a system with a global currency that you didn't have to exchange in and out of, right? I know that a lot of times, in order to purchase Bitcoin, initially you need to do it on exchange, you'll pay exchange fees. But what I'm talking about is like when we go to South Africa and we exchange, let's say we bring $100 cash and we exchange it for Rand, there's a percentage of an exchange fee that we pay.
Yeah.
We could exchange it here and pay one rate. We could exchange it there, pay another rate. We could go next door and pay one other rate, right?
Mhm.
But there's a cost to exchange just one currency to another currency. And I think with the um, overwhelming usage of the internet and how social media has really forged the way for kind of global communities. I would say I think that a currency or money that can be exchanged without having to go from one currency to another currency to another currency to another currency is super helpful as these global communities are growing.
Yeah.
We keep going back to it, but here we are, these two people in the middle of the United States who travel often over to another continent and have to exchange money. And though our credit cards or our debit cards does that for us, there's still a fee to
Mm.
do it. It's not free to do it if you're using a credit card. It's not free to do it if you're using cash. And this is why I think it would be so helpful. You even see people who are migrant workers. So somebody in we would talk about it here. Somebody from Mexico comes to the US to work and send money back home. Well, they have to exchange their money from home to come here to spend it. Then they make money in the US dollar and then send it back to be exchanged back into the peso. And there's fees associated with that. So they could be losing 20 to 30% of what they're making just to be able to get it usable for their family. This isn't the only example. We've heard of farm workers, I think it was in Zimbabwe, who do the same thing, right? So
Mhm.
there are countries that have people that go to other countries to work to provide for their families. And if you can just take away the fee for simply crossing a border, so it doesn't cost anything for this body to cross a border, but for money or value to cross a border, it's expensive. It is
Right.
really expensive. And I think that is one of the huge problems that can be solved with this. If we just have a parallel system, if we want to operate in Bitcoin, let us operate in Bitcoin, exchange peer to peer. Yeah, there's a network fee, but it is negligible. It is like percentages of a percent.
Right.
It's very small as opposed to, like I said before, 10 to 30% to exchange money from one currency to another. That
Yeah.
could be a game changer. That could help poverty globally. It could help so much.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm sure you can argue either way that you want to, but I there are undeniable aspects that it would simplify things if that was the case. And I think at least for my belief system that that's what I would like to see start happening is I would like to see it being used more to trade, buy goods, and I would like to see it being used more internationally so that there is um, you start to see that removal of borders or the cost to go across borders.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And to be clear, I'm not saying like one government globally. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the ability to use one currency. And I'm not even saying replace everything with this. I'm saying
Right.
make it an option. This is why we keep saying a parallel system. So can we make it a viable option? So if we want to use this, we can step into that and use it. And will it be accepted in different places? And the other thing is not just exchanging. So I could send Bitcoin to Josh. I could send Bitcoin to Armand, who was on last week. I could do that. But can you spend that somewhere else? That's the question. So right now I can send it peer to peer, but is it usable to exchange for other things of value that you need, like a loaf of bread and a gallon of milk?
Right. Yeah.
Or do I have to exchange it back into a world currency?
Right. That's really the meat of this whole conversation is can we see it start being used so that it stays within the Bitcoin ecosystem. And, for me as a consumer to go and buy a loaf of bread, and then for that retailer to be able to use that same Satoshi to pay their supplier, and for that supplier to be able to pay the farmer and the producer, and it just creates a circle where it stays within the same economy. That's what I would love to see. And I don't know how soon we are to that. We are seeing more and more places where you can go and you can purchase using cryptocurrency, but typically that retailer is then just going to sell it to get back to their native currency. So, that's a step in the right direction, but the step I would like to see is just for it to be able to remain part without as a parallel system without having to intersect all the time.
Right.
That's what I would like to see.
Right. Can it run alongside smoothly without constantly having to like dip and like hit the other system all the time?
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see if that happens, but I can tell you that Kim and I will continue to pursue that line of thought, at least until Father tells us otherwise.
True. Cool. Thanks for joining today. We will see you back on Tuesday, actually, not Monday. We're just switching things way up. So we have Wednesday this week. We'll have Tuesday next week, but we will see you then. Have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend.
See you.
Thank you for listening. Join us every Monday and Thursday as we discuss trading on earth as it is in heaven. If you want to connect further, follow us on social media at market.mystics for Instagram and TikTok, and search for Market Mystics on YouTube and Facebook. If you still need more, follow the link on Facebook to book a coaching appointment. Until next time, see ya.